They were out early one morning, panning in the stream for gold, surrounded by the rising mountains. Old prospector with a tale for two, he brushed around in the pan, and pointing out what lay within was ordinary sand. He began with his story about 20 years before, and a younger man who sought his fortune. With a tear or two he told of searching for his treasure, but making known the gold he sought was ordinary pleasure. There were years of doing without, and there were years of plenty. He started thinking that life was never steady, excepting when the bills came in and he had no money to pay. Whiskey had never tasted better ordinarily. Concluded his story as he filled the air with a laugh, saying how he found the Lord and Savior, and how he found the river of life by which his day unfolds, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Through His word we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. We can return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. promises. Through His Word we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. We can return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Trust in God, believe upon His promises.
All right, well, welcome and God bless everybody. My name is Mark Wallace. This is True North Studio, and today the topic is controlling the spirit of fear. So 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." So what is the spirit of fear? Is it even a spirit or is it something else? The spirit of fear is not the kind of fear that causes the heart to race and pupils to dilate and palms to sweat. The spirit of fear is not fight or flight. The type of fear I'm going to discuss today is one that whispers to you so softly, so out of sight, so unnoticed, that over time it hijacks your heart without you consciously even realizing it. The spirit of fear stops all forward progress, redirects all personal growth, and makes you think you made a good decision when you really didn't. The spirit of fear has been working you your entire life. So as long as you're an evolving, growing, and giving person, you will never get rid of the spirit of fear, but you can learn to control it. The spirit of fear is like the old arcade game, Whack-A-Mole, where you hit one and another one pops up. Then you hit that one and another one pops up, over and over. Well, that's the way of the world. As we grow up, we're slowly and systematically beaten down by the systems of the world, by its rules and social norms. We're told to color between the lines, to stay in your lane, to fit in, to assimilate, and by all means, don't rock the boat. So by the time we're adults, we're so used to not doing what we're put on here on earth to do that we no longer realize what was at stake. And if you have ever started something to better your life or the lives of others, and you quit, you were beat by the spirit of fear. So it's a pretty big deal, this thing. Now, if you've ever started working out and losing weight, but slowly gave up and went back to your old ways, you've dealt with the spirit of fear. If you've ever written a song or a book or a screenplay and gave up on it right before release, you've dealt with the spirit of fear. If you've ever said, "I'll get started on it tomorrow," you've dealt with the spirit of fear. See, we've all dealt with this. We've all dealt with this stuff. But I'm going to show you how to control it. Now, if you've ever started working on an invention or a cure, and you wake up in the middle of the night dreaming about how to solve the problem, but eventually you just set it aside, you have dealt with or are dealing with the spirit of fear. The spirit of fear will tell you anything to keep you from doing what you really want to do. The spirit of fear is always lying, and it's always full of crap. The more important something is to your growth, your personal growth, the more the spirit of fear will be there to slow things down. Eve heard it. Judas heard it. We all have a calling, a purpose, a life's dream, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. We all have some mojo, that special something that betters the world and separates you from the masses. Did you know that you also have sub-callings? Now, if you're a therapist who loves to dance and you stop dancing because you're too busy handling other people's problems, do you think that it will affect your work? Mm-hmm. Yes. If you stop gardening, will it be a sacrifice? You bet. If you give up running or working out or singing karaoke or working your hobby or sport shopping, like my wife, will it suck the air out of the room? Probably. To give up on your side calling is a huge mistake, folks. We all know our side callings are not the most important contribution to humanity, but it's an essential part of you. And it needs to have its place in the sun. Your side calling needs to have room to breathe. Something inside of you will wither if you quit on your side calling. And the spirit of fear is well aware of that, so don't ignore your hobbies and your side callings. Now let's shake things up again. Let's throw the canoe back in the water. Let's rekindle the adventure. Let's refresh the gift of God that God gave us. Let's turn the tables and throw the spirit of fear off of its game. Let's control the spirit of fear. So that's my open. And Timothy is a case study on the spirit of fear. So how would you like every Christian in the world to know your secret fears? Any of you? Okay. Not so much. None of us would, right? Especially that one thing. Paul wrote to his friend Timothy, and he said, "For God did not give us a spirit of timidity or cowardice or fear, but he has given us a spirit of power and of love and of sound judgment and personal discipline, abilities that result in a calm, well-balanced mind and self-control." 2 Timothy 1:7 from the AMP. Once again, I ask you, is the spirit of fear a devil spirit or is it behavior? Well, actually, both of those are part of the definition, biblically. Both a spirit and behavior. You ever heard like, well, that girl has spirit. Well, it doesn't mean she's possessed, right? That would mean they have energy, right? Okay? Well, it means the same thing in the Greek. Or it could mean, that boy's got some spirit. That could mean something different, right? You see, anything that slows you down or gets you to quit on yourself is sprinkled with and infected by the spirit of fear, cowardice, and timidity. The spirit of fear deals with behavior. Now, psychologists may scoff at the simplicity of this. Counselors may mock this teaching. Life coaches may cover your eyes. Ministers may shake their fingers and tell you that it isn't so, but I tell you that it is. I've been around long enough. Let's see how Paul, the Apostle Paul, tried to push-start Timothy through his own personal valley of death, hoping to get his engine running again. You ever had a friend like that was there for you when you weren't even there for yourself? That's a good friend. Paul was a good friend for Timothy. We all deal with different fears at different times in our life. Your fear, your timidity, the behavior that got you to quit on your gift at any point will be different than his or hers. So be kind to Timothy, okay? When I read this stuff, you're going to think, what a wuss. Don't. You have no idea how tough this kid was. Okay, so now a little background on Timothy. I got to set the background or you won't understand what Paul's doing here. Timothy was raised in an interracial household. His dad was Greek and his mom was Judean. Very taboo. She believed in the Christ and his dad did not. Timothy was a man of two cultures and he was seamless at both of them. And this helped him when he traveled around with Paul. When most kids were trying to navigate the high school pecking order, Timothy's mom and grandma taught him to navigate his life by polishing up his spiritual gift. Timothy learned to walk with power long before Paul had written the epistle that bears his name. Timothy was something. To add a little color to Timothy, he traveled the world with Paul. He started when he was a teenager. You see, he spent time with Peter. Peter, Who wouldn't want to spend time with Peter, the guy who hung out with Jesus Christ? He broke bread with Titus. There's an epistle written to Titus. He sat with Silas. He barnstormed with Barnabas. Barnabas was the guy who saved Paul, who got Paul going. You know, he met with the guy named Mark who wrote the book of Mark. He even got to meet Jesus' half-brothers, Judas and James, and they both wrote epistles. Timothy heard all of Luke's stories many times as he traveled the Mediterranean. Why was young Timothy chosen to travel and minister with Paul and Luke as they traveled the known world? He was handpicked because a man's gift makes room for him. Proverbs 18:16. The reason Timothy was asked to sit with the cool kids is because he was not afraid to openly use his gift. He was not afraid to live out loud. Even as a teen, he was crazy good at his God-given talents. Timothy was allowed to hang around amazing people because he too was amazing to hang around. The only way you're going to get to hang around with people like Paul and Peter and James and John and Luke and all the other apostles is you better be one hot dude. You see, I mean, not hot looking, but I mean, you better really have some stuff going. First off, Timothy was no wimp. He was tough. He had spent 25 years away from home and he left when he was about 15. He sailed the world on open ships, not like cruise ships like we've been on, okay? And he had to eat different foods from different cultures. He had to debate with the educated people of the world and socialize with people who showed interest in the Word when he was young. Think of him as a cross between Indiana Jones with just a splash of Captain Jack Sparrow and the strength of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Timothy was a badass with a heart. Like Luke, the physician who quit his practice to travel with Paul, Timothy also donated his time and life to spreading the gospel and utilizing his gifts. Not many people are willing to do that. Now, by the time 2 Timothy was written, Timothy had traveled with Paul for maybe 25 years, a full career. Paul would have been in his mid-60s by this time, and Timothy was now around 40. There was no mention of a wife, kids, grandkids, no property, no retirement, no legacy. The plot thickens. Like many of you ministers and artists and musicians and teachers and doctors and moms, first responders, military men and women, Timothy gave it all for the cause. He literally gave up his earning years in service to others until right now. Something happened in his big, beautiful heart that froze him. Now, this was one tough dude. He was a tough dude. But something stopped him. For Paul to have to write him and say, don't let this spirit of fear stop you, what stopped him? What froze him? Something that had been in the back of his brain for a long time finally stopped his forward progress. Now, don't be too hard on old Timothy. Let's analyze Timothy's major fear here. The fear that wore him down was a type of shame. Now, it may not mean much to you, but there's people every day terminating their lives because of shame, because of something they've done in the past, or something they're a part of, whatever. So 2 Timothy 1:8 says, "Be not thou therefore ashamed of the testimony of the Lord, of our Lord, nor of me his prisoner, but be thou a partaker of the afflictions of the gospel according to the power of God." Timothy was ashamed of two basic things. One, he was ashamed of Jesus Christ. And two, he was ashamed that Paul was in prison again. Now, being ashamed of the testimony of our Lord is talking about the life and accomplishments and the manifested results of the Christ. Now, how could a guy like Timothy, who traveled with Paul, have been ashamed of the Christ? How? How is it even possible? You know, you're thinking, You're thinking, no way Timothy would ever be ashamed of the Lord Jesus Christ, Mark. You're crazy, dude. Hey, I didn't write the epistle. Paul did. You know, has society ever gotten you to comply when you didn't want to? Have you ever shut up about the word because you thought the group that you were with were not going to be cool with it? I don't like that. I've had it happen where I was ashamed to speak the word because I thought these people are going to think I'm not cool if I do it. Well, that's a light version of what Timothy went through. Wait till you hear what I'm about to go into here. Now, would you be as bold to teach the Christ in Iran, to teach about the Christ in Iran as you would in rural Kentucky? Huh? Would you? Would you be as bold in Iran, where they might kill you for being a Christian, as you would in rural Kentucky, where they'll give you some sweet tea and pie? See, answer me this. Have you ever become ashamed of someone that you once respected because of what others said about them? Think high school and junior high. Has groupthink ever changed your mind about someone? If so, you have been targeted by the spirit of fear. So don't think that you're immune from this, folks. You have all been hit by this stuff. To understand Timothy's hesitation and trepidation, we need to understand the culture and times in which he lived. Now, it wasn't like today. In less than 35 years, Christianity had spread around the entire Mediterranean Sea. It was relatively new. It spread across the entire Roman Empire. Timothy was a big part of it, but things were about to change. At first, the word spread because Christians relocated because of fear of religious persecution from the Judeans and not from accepting the pecking order of Israel. Now, you understand, maybe if you've left a church at one point, sometimes you had to get out of town because it was too much pressure. It's hard. You see, it may be some of the same reason that you left that church or that ministry way back when, because of their intimidation and practices. Well, then, like the schoolyard bullies that they were, the Romans, they also piled on the Christians. Because when somebody's getting attacked, don't the bullies like to attack again? Yeah. So the Romans were the bullies of the world, really. And they saw them getting attacked by the Judeans. Now they wanted to attack. And they attacked with a vengeance unparalleled in modern times. To stand out in first century Roman culture was inviting trouble. And did Timothy ever stand out? He looked different. He acted different. He moved different. He had a different accent. He talked about the Christ, of which most people never even heard at that point. Most evenings, Christians would get together and eat and sing and give words of prophecy and discuss them. They would do something called the love feast, which is a version of what we'd call communion. And if new people were present, they would speak in tongues and interpret. Read 1 Corinthians 12 and 14. And when they were not in the meetings, these Christian people would go around and boldly talk to any strangers that would listen to them in the marketplace about what they were learning, and they would talk about the Christ. You ever seen Christians do that? You ever done that? I have. I've annoyed a lot of people. Okay? And then they would bring these new and curious people to these get-togethers. Now, do you think this attracted attention? Yes. Yes. Now, was attracting attention in Rome a good idea? No. Now, being noticed is not always a good idea around people who have conquered the world and a people who enslave everybody who doesn't think their way. Everybody. The Romans enslaved everybody. And the Romans hated anything or anyone who was different. They just hated them. You know, they weren't racist as we think of racism. They didn't care about the color of your skin or the backwater country that you came from. As long as you dressed, ate, spoke, thought, believed like they did, you were just fine. You're just fine. And this was hard for the early Christians. They didn't play well with pagans, and they became known as barbarians by the Romans. The barbarian Romans thought of Christians as being pagans and barbarians. It's sort of nuts, right? Yes. Well, there's people who think that today they think Christians are barbarians. There's people today who hate Christians so much they would like to kill them. So don't think it doesn't happen today, but it was worse then. Now, Timothy's in this culture. He's got to navigate through the streets so he doesn't run into certain people. He had to be smart. He had to be tough. He had to back people down when he needed to. You understand? Christians weren't galloping up. They weren't barbarians like we think. They didn't gallop up to small villages on war horses, raping and pillaging. You know, they were just mingling with the townsfolk, speaking the word and walking with power. But this was different. The Emperor Nero went so far as saying the followers of Christ were non-humans and haters of humans, per Tacitus, the first century Roman senator and historian. Nero, the emperor of Rome, thought of Christians as non-humans and haters of the humans. Now, do Christians love people? Yeah. You think they loved people in the first century? Yes. Okay, they were even closer to the Christ than we were, right? Some of them knew the Christ. They were his buddy, right? They were apostles. But the Romans thought these people were barbarians and haters of humanity. Therefore, they could do if you're not a human, they can do any kind of torture to you and have no feeling. Think of the hate, fear, and conformity generated by the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese in the 1940s. Did they do some horrific things? They did crazy bad things to humanity because they thought they were lesser humans. Just for fun at parties, Emperor Nero may have Christians slathered in tar head to toe and set on fire to become running, screaming light shows. This was entertainment before fireworks. You think, oh, no one would do that. They did that. They did that. At other times, Nero would have Christians bound. He would tied in fresh, bloody animal hides. They just had slaughtered an animal and they would strap them in their hide and then throw them out. And then they would stand back, and then the feral dogs, packs of feral dogs would come and start jerking it. You ever seen dogs tear something apart? They would tear the Christians limb to limb. This was entertainment to the Romans. You think Timothy knew it? So you think being a Christian was a little bit dangerous in that culture, especially in Rome, where Paul's asking him to come? Okay? I mean, so this is not a culture like today where somebody looks at you and you get your feelings hurt, or you hear somebody laughing at the next table and you think they're laughing about you. This wasn't like that, okay? What brought the greatest applause from the bloodthirsty Roman, from their fans, was the warm-up act just before the gladiators entered the arena. And they would chain an unarmed Christian or a criminal to a huge stone and then release starving lions into the stadium. Nobody would do that. Yes, they do. Or they did. You know, I once saw such an arena when I visited Pompeii, Italy. And in the center of this 2,600-year-old state amphitheater was a huge stone buried flush with the ground. And it had a single metal ring sticking out at the midpoint of this huge rock, as big as your dining room table. And I asked my Italian tour guide what it was for. What was that ring for? And she had to tear herself away from her oh-so-important cell phone. And she looked up and she said in her bored, monotone, broken English, She said, this is where they would chain up criminals and Christians for the lions to eat before the gladiators came out. Now I'm making a joke, but I mean, she was so used to saying that she's bored. But I mean, just think, chaining up a human being in the middle of an amphitheater and then releasing wild animals to eat the thing in front of all the fans going, oh, how nice. I can't wait for the gladiators to come out. You know, it was a warm-up act.
That's ridiculous.
It's crazy. It's craziness. Timothy was raised in this desensitized, bloody culture. He knew how to fit in and had easily evaded personal attack and imprisonment for maybe 25 years. You think this guy was smart?
Yes.
Yeah. He knew all too well that the life expectancy of a Christian was far less than that of someone who participated fully with the Roman state religion and lifestyle. Now we think, oh, we'd never, well, you know, we see people come from other countries and they wear their headgear and they wear their, and we think, why don't they assimilate? Why don't they look like us? Why are they eating their crazy food and talking with that stupid accent? Well, that's how the Romans felt, but they would kill you. You know, it's the same thing. I mean, we see a light version of it. We understand. You see, the Romans would force you to assimilate. Now, recently, Paul had shot off his mouth and he got himself thrown in prison again. And now he's asking me to travel halfway around the world to visit him at Supermax in Rome. What if they grab me too? That's what Timothy thought.
Sure.
I mean, if you showed up and walked into a Roman prison, you may never walk out of there. Now, Timothy had long ago given up any hope of a normal family life, but he still wanted to live. He had never built a career, never had a wife or raised a family, never stayed in one place. He had left his friends and family behind 25 years earlier to travel with Paul. He also knew what happened to his friends Onesiphorus, Demas, Titus, and many others. He knew that almost all the believers in the Middle East had recently turned their backs on Paul's gospel and went back to their old lives. Now the plot's thickening. Now just think, if all your friends, if you're like one of the last ones left in this guy's ministry, would you be thinking twice about doing things? You might. It's hard. When everybody's doing something, there's got to be a reason they're all doing this. The weight of the world, Roman threat, politics, and most of his friends leaving Paul's ministry was a secret burden of shame that weighed Timothy down like a millstone, and he felt every pound of it. This was normal Christian fear in 65 AD. This being ashamed of Jesus and Paul was the fear that froze Timothy, stopped his forward progress, and shut down his personal ministries. You know, I knew a girl who was a minister, a woman, and she ended up, she got disappointed with the ministry. She ended up throwing away all her Bibles and all her research materials, and she doesn't even consider herself a Christian anymore. You think that's a spirit of fear?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. But it could be a lighter version of that for us. We could just, I'm not going to speak the word to this guy. Who knows what he's going to think of me or she? It's the same thing. 2 Timothy 1:12. See, now this is the second verse on being ashamed. There's 3 verses in this section. So the first one was Paul talking about Timothy being ashamed. And I had this long dialogue after that, okay? Now, verse 12, it says, For the which cause I also suffer these things. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed, for I know whom I have believed, and I am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. See, Paul faced the same social and political fears as Timothy, but they did not stop him from using his gift. While in a Roman jail or prison, Paul wrote Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon, and 2 Timothy. Have any of you ever been in jail? Any of you ever been in prison? What about a third world jail or prison? It's not a nice place. And Paul was able to keep his head together and still write and get those words out to somebody outside that prison. How did he do that? You know, what stops one person doesn't always affect another. So what stops you from doing you? What stops you from being the best version of you? It was other things that wore down Paul. It's probably other things that have slowed you down on living your gift at times. Now remember, your gift and that side calling are different things. It could be, your side calling could be a musician. And you may write a song that's going to change the world, save lives, write a book. You know, who knows what you're going to do? Sometimes just gardening makes you feel good so you can be a good minister or can be a good mom or whatever. You get my point. 3 times people have tried to kill me as I was speaking the word to them, twice with pistols. Now, cold steel in my ribs didn't stop me from speaking the word to them. But like you, I am stubborn enough to paddle harder upstream because that didn't stop me. It just energizes me. Not that I want pistols in my ribs. You know, I'm just saying that everybody's different. Everybody's different. Other things stop me though. You know, the simple cares of the world have rusted my gears at times. You see, trying to change another man's ministry slowed me down to a crawl. You know why? Still the spirit of fear. I was still doing something I should not have been doing. I wasn't living my gift. I was trying to do something that I thought was noble, but it wasn't right for me. That's why I finally had to leave that group. I didn't fit anymore. It grew away from me, or I grew away from it. I don't care. What stops you? That's what I want you to think. What stops you? What moves you to inaction? What are you afraid of? What gets you to quit on yourself? What gets you to quit on your gifts? That, my friends, would be the spirit of fear. So don't tell me you've never seen it. Don't tell me you've never heard its sweet, soft voice. Don't tell me you have never been affected by it, because you have. Peer pressure is fear pressure. Now the third. The third ashamed mentioned in the spirit of fear section. 2 Timothy 1:16. The Lord give mercy unto the house of Onesiphorus, for he oft refreshed me, and was not ashamed of my chain. But when he was in Rome, he sought me out very diligently and found me. The Lord grant unto him that he may find mercy of the Lord in that day, and in how many things he ministered unto me at Ephesus. Thou knowest very well. So Timothy knew this guy, Onesiphorus. This is our final usage of shame in this example. And this one breaks my heart. Almost brings me to tears when I think about this guy. So Onesiphorus was not ashamed of Paul in prison. Timothy was. Paul closes out this section on controlling the spirit of fear by mentioning a man Timothy knew very well, Onesiphorus. Paul is pulling out all the stops now. He wants Timothy to move in spite of the fear, in spite of what all of the other friends have done, in spite of the danger. Folks, that is not easy to do. Paul mentions how Onesiphorus came to Rome and had a hell of a time trying to find the hole in which the Romans had hidden him. Onesiphorus found Paul at great cost to himself. Some of the more famous Roman prisons were chambers built underground. Prisoners were literally dropped through the hole in the ceiling, into this dark room. And there was one way in and there was one way out. You see, and it was a manhole maybe about 12 feet above the floor. And you can look up the Mamertine or the Tullianum prisons in Rome, and they're still there. And these are possibly a place that Paul was. It's just a hole. It was once a cistern where they kept water underground. And then they started using it for a prison for their worst prisoners. It was Supermax. You could not break out of this place. It was pitch black. So how Paul did what he did, I have no idea. He probably had to have a little crack of light to write. Where did he get the paper and pen from? Well, we'll get to that in a second. The term give mercy to the house of Onesiphorus and finding mercy in the Lord's day is a soft way of saying that this man had recently died while trying to help Paul. Onesiphorus gave his life to help Paul. Now, Paul is addressing this to the immediate family of Onesiphorus, as well as anyone reading the letter at that time who knew him. This verse is the equivalent of a first century GoFundMe site. In that culture, there was no welfare, no government relief, no homeless shelters, no stimulus checks. Without a husband, the family was about to face some really hard times unless someone kicked in and helped. They needed mercy, compassion, and the kindness of others just to survive. Paul had needed even more mercy when he was in the hole. The word mercy was used twice in that section, in that verse. Mercy here is active compassion, not withheld judgment like a lot of you are taught. Mercy is withheld judgment. No, here mercy is active compassion. Have mercy on me. Okay? And it's active compassion. Be assured that Onesiphorus will be super blessed and wonderfully rewarded in the future. But the family really, really needs help now. Do you think, knowing this from this letter from Paul, you think it affected Timothy even more? If you knew one of your friends just died doing what you're getting asked to come and do, it'll give you second thoughts. From the context, we know that Onesiphorus literally gave his life in helping to find and care for Paul. Did his life make a difference? You see, we may not have certain parts of the Bible if it wasn't for fearless men like Onesiphorus. I may not even be here today. You may not either. This guy kicked ass, Onesiphorus. A Roman prison was not like an American prison. Justice was not speedy, and there were not 3 meals a day. If you were going to live, it took people on the outside to bring you blankets, clothing, reading materials, and sometimes food. They had to give at their own expense. They had to gain access to the prison, give the required bribes to the guards, and try to get food and clothing and reading materials past all the other inmates all the way to the prisoner. This was not easy. It cost Onesiphorus his life. Onesiphorus was absolutely not ashamed, nor was he afraid of Paul's imprisonment, which means he was fearless in the face of the Romans. The Romans didn't like people who were not afraid of them. They were outliers, deviants, troublemakers. Onesiphorus was one tough hombre, sort of like you. Onesiphorus' love, his care, his actions in the face of danger cost him his life, and his family paid a high price for his service. Some of you can relate. If you've been in the service and been over there, you know what I'm talking about. If you've been a first responder, you know what I'm talking about. If you've been a policeman or a nurse or a doctor or a teacher or a mom, you know what I'm talking about. Without his sacrifice, we would not have 2 Timothy and maybe a few other epistles. Was his fearless attitude worth it? Well, to his wife and kids, probably not. Okay? But to the millions of us who've learned from Paul, the answer's a resounding yes, yes, yes. To be associated with the Christ and with Paul caused Timothy to freeze, and that caused him shame. You ever been ashamed? So how does this help us? You know, the ratio, and I'm going to use something called the ratio of 3 to 1. Now, we've seen what froze Timothy. He'd become ashamed of being a Christian and of being associated with Paul. Paul was not ashamed of him, though. And it took 25 years for the world to wear down the once great Timothy. And the spirit of fear is patient, folks. Spirit of fear is patient. The same fear didn't affect Paul or Onesiphorus. Timothy's fear is not your fear. Plus, your fears are different at different times. They come and go. Like I said earlier, you will never live a fearless life. When you get on top of one, another pops up. I know, it's exhausting. Did you know that the spirit of fear actually points you in the direction that you should be going? The spirit of fear will point you in the direction that you should be going. Now, here's where we can use the spirit of fear against itself. And this is what Paul was teaching. Like some ancient, rusty, demented compass, the spirit of fear will always point to your true north as it tries to keep you from reaching it. Maybe it's intimidation. I don't know. If you've settled into life and forgotten to live your godly gift, if you've ever quit on any of your side callings, the hobbies that refreshed you so you had the energy to live your true calling, you know what I'm talking about. Just try to remember that damned old spirit of fear has been keeping you from. Try to remember what it's been keeping you from, and you will once again be back on course, and you'll begin to prosper in ways unimaginable. If you know what you're being stopped from doing, that's a pretty good indication of what you should be doing. Now, I'm not talking about stupid stuff, okay? Like don't jump off the house or the cliff. I'm not talking about that kind of fear. That's to save you from dying, okay? This is not that kind of fear. This kind of fear is just to stop you from living out your calling, from living your gift. Now, see, you can pick up where you left off. You may be a little longer in the tooth. You may have a few more scars and stretch marks, but you can resume your adventure. Moses came back after a 40-year hiatus with the spirit of fear. Did you know that? Moses took 40 years off after God called him. Joseph came back to his calling after being sold into slavery by his brothers and then thrown into prison. And he beat the spirit of fear and saved Israel. Job got his head back from the spirit of fear after marauders and the weather killed his 10 children and took over his many businesses. Job is another case study on the spirit of fear. Job was the richest man in the world, and he lost everything and his whole family on one day because of the spirit of fear. You think it doesn't affect the life? Paul himself turned from being a murderer of Christians to becoming the most prolific and greatest mover of God's word in history, besides all of you. Okay? So what do we do with this information? How do we beat the spirit of fear at its own game? How do we control the spirit of fear? Can we control the spirit of fear? Well, let's start with Paul's 3-to-1 ratio. And this is a very simple way to deal with any fear. And this will help you with anything that you're working on, folks. A 3-to-1 ratio has 4 parts. 3 plus 1 equal 4, right? Okay, now I love working with concrete, so I'm going to use a concrete example. Now, basic concrete is made up of 4 ingredients: Portland cement, sand, water, and aggregates or stones. Now, like I mentioned earlier, you will never eradicate fear, but you can control it. We can find a way to live it. Now, notice I didn't say accept it. Now, verse 7 again, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Paul starts his concrete victory mix with the rocks, the aggregates, and this is like the spirit of fear, okay? These are rocks. This is aggregate. He starts it with that. Okay, then he adds a shovelful of power, okay? Then he adds a shovelful of power, and this would be like sand, okay? So then he adds a couple of shovelfuls of this power. You see? And then he takes a scoop of love. And love is the Portland, okay? And then he adds just the right amount. You see? Just the right amount of that. Now power, and so just to get this to you. Oh, and then we have to add, got to add a little bit of water, okay? Okay, that was way too much for that little bit, but you get the point. Okay, now, so I've added Portland cement, I've added aggregate, I've added water, and I've added sand. So those are the 4 ingredients of concrete. So now let's look at this for just a second. So power. Remember he said power, love, and sound mind. So these are our 3 ingredients. So what do they mean? So you're saying, that sounds religious to me. Okay, power is a Greek word dunamis, and it means miraculous power. How many of you ever seen a miracle? Okay, all of you have. Seen amazing things happen in your life. I could tell you story after story. Okay, power is miraculous power, which would mean the Spirit of God, right? Think body, soul, and spirit. Now love. Love is agape love here. It's a love that's so big, so deep, so giving, so much bigger than philanthropy, so much bigger than brotherly love that it expects nothing in return. It's not love for hire. It knows that it already knows that it has everything that it will ever need. That's the kind of love. You can love at that level. Mothers love at that level. Grandparents love at that level. Some teachers and coaches love at that level. They expect nothing in return and they give everything. So you add that in. So first you got to walk with power. Then you got to add in that kind of love. You got to have that kind of love if you want to beat the spirit of fear. If you don't want to love, if love to you is trading, like you do something for me, I'll do something for you. Wink, wink. Okay? Now we all like that kind of love, right? It's good. It's a good kind of love, but it's not what we're talking about here. And the third one here, the third thing, the third ingredient. Now, first I should say the fear, we're going to call that the aggregate, okay? That's those little rocks, those little rocks in your life. You ever have rocks in your shoes? Okay? They irritate you, right? And I get them when I do the Pikes Peak Marathon, and they're irritating. And then you got to stop and dump your shoes out to keep going because it just drives you crazy. Well, that's the spirit of fear. It just stops you. It makes you sit down and dump them out of your shoe. Okay? And so sound mind here simply means self-control, restraint, or grit. Now, I prefer the word grit here. And because sound mind is not really a good translation. You know, the word sound mind here doesn't mean a good thinker. Too much thinking is what got Timothy into trouble in the first place. You know, grit is an action word, not a passive word. Grit is offense and defense at the same time. It's having your head on a swivel, you see. And now I'm going to over-spiritualize this concrete example. I think I just did it. Okay, so fear again is rocks in your concrete, okay? Fear is rocks, you know, and it's like the song says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Fear adds those scars, and scars add character, okay? And so it's not bad. You're not going to ever live a fearless life, folks. You can't. I don't care how much you plead to Jesus or to God, or how many times you go to church. You're never going to have a fearless life. So you better just figure out how to get used to it, how to control this thing. So here's how you do it. So now you add the sand in with that. So you have this aggregate, these rocks, this fear. Okay, I got rocks. What am I going to do with it? Well, I'm going to add some sand to that. I'm going to put some grit. I'm going to add some weight to that, okay? This is self-control. This is restraint. This gives you weight. This makes you unmovable. You ever try to move heavy cement? It's hard. It's hard. Then love. Now rocks, now just think about this. Now this, if I put this on your driveway and you sprayed it with the hose, what's going to happen? It's going to wash away, right? Okay? Now love is this cement. Love is this cement. Love is the Portland cement that gets mixed in there. And it binds it all together. Without cement, without love, you know, life life is washed away like a well-built sandcastle near the ocean. You see? Now the fourth one is power. And power is that water. And it touches every part of that. It goes, life goes a long way with that. So you have to have that too. Love just integrates. This is one that I poured this morning, okay? Now, it's not fully set yet, but it's getting there. See? It's like a Dairy Queen sundae, right? You see? But this one's going to get hard. Now, once this hardens up, can you wash it away with water? Probably not. Maybe over a long length of time you could. Okay, one shovelful of power, one of love, one of grit, mixed with the aggregate of fear. And this makes us stronger, folks. For every shovelful of fear heaped on you by this world, add a shovelful of power, another of love, and use your heaping gift of grit. Nothing. You never eliminate all fear, but you can use it to add strength to your life. Power is ability. Love is acting in spite of ingratitude or fear. And grit is your constant inner coach. Think body, soul, and spirit. If Jesus came to dismantle the works of the devil, then there must be a formula. There is. We dismantle his works by adding some of our own works, our own ingredients. 1 John 3:8. You see, Paul said the 3-to-1 ratio is power, love, and grit to control the spirit of fear. You want to see your gift reemerge or re-energize? Then find a way to tap back into your powerful spiritual side. Go hard to the Word. Get involved in helping others. Manifest more. And some of you know how to do this. Find a way to love, expecting nothing in return from the world. Always know that God's got your back, your six, your blind spot. And this is not giving till it hurts. This is giving till the job gets done. That's the kind of love here. You just never, ever quit. And to be able to live like that, it's going to take grit, self-control, restraint. You have to have a sound mind, sound enough to get you past the sweet, alluring siren song or the whistling bullets of Tijuana. So you tell yourself, and this will help you. Tell yourself, I am loved, I am powerful, and I have grit. I am loved, I am powerful, and I get stuff done. I'm loved, I'm powerful, I make things happen. I'm loved, I'm powerful, and I live my gift. Never again allow the enemy to sweet talk you out of your gift. Never again allow the enemy to sweet talk you out of your side callings. We don't know if Timothy snapped out of it. We don't know. We don't know if he did what Paul suggested and mixed into his life more power, more love, and more grit. But we do know that we're still able to read the Bible today. Somebody had the balls, the grit, the fortitude to keep the word alive and to preserve and pass on the epistles. And I want to think that Timothy was part of it. Because of Timothy and Paul and people like you, we can live our gift with grit and without fear. You are loved, you are powerful, and you have grit. You have found a simple way to control the spirit of fear. God bless.